My talk will be on surgical training, which I've done a lot of over the years. It takes you back to the basics a little more, and it allows the other speakers to build on the technology. So I will share my talk with you, which is this one. The title is slightly different. It is the challenge of training fellows on patients, because this is what it really goes to. This is what we used to do, and things are transitioning now. It also talks about the talent of surgery and where talent gets you. Now, in your surgical expertise, you use a lot of fancy tools and technology, and you can have the best technology in the world. If you're not well trained, things do not always develop the way you would like them to develop. So this is what you'd rather not have during your training. And the aspects which we have and how training's changed is, I'll just start this again. This is John Webb, who's my former mentor and the head of the spine unit in Nottingham when it was founded, and John has some thoughts on how surgical training has changed.
Once you got your part one, you could then train as a surgeon. So you had to go through the whole program of doing general surgery for 2 years, 18 months minimum, plus urology or another specialty, and you had to do trauma. And you learn to become a surgeon. Unlike you guys now. You know, you don't know your arse and your tits. You know, I asked.
So this is the way surgery has changed, of course. And the take on the old style surgery, where you did everything, you encountered everything, that has, of course, changed. There's the concept that you can, of course, with 10,000 hours of practice, this is the deliberate practice theory, you can learn any skill. So anything is doable with 10,000 hours, and talent is not necessary. But who has 10,000 hours? This is a significant challenge to actually spend 10,000 hours. And if you look at 2015, if you spend 3 days in surgery, 8 hours a week, 30 weeks, 6 years, you spent approximately 2,500 hours in spine and neurosurgery, around about 500 hours in ortho. And then the European Time Directive came, and in residency 2013, 2023, you spend about 500 hours in neurosurgery and 200 hours of spine and ortho. So this leaves you very significantly short of your 10,000 hours for your deliberate practice theory. So if we can't spend 10,000 hours doing the surgery, then what will we be able to do next?
I had to learn that. And then I went to the Birmingham Accident Hospital, which was the only hospital in this country which was experimental, where we did everything. Burr holes, thoracotomies, very much like the German system. We did everything. So I was doing burr holes in the middle of the night, doing thoracotomies, putting stitches in a stabbed heart, taking spleens out, cauterizing the duodenum, taking bits of liver out, bit of duodenum or whatever.
This is obviously not the way things are anymore. So the question then, if you cannot spend 10,000 hours becoming a surgeon, is ability necessary to explain the development of expertise? And this goes into learning theory, which I would just like to elucidate for you. So practice volume alone does not correlate with expertise. So you can develop expertise with a lesser number of hours. You don't have to have a maximum of a number of hours. It depends on how you practice and how you learn. And there's a concept which is called deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is if you enjoy your practice and you have your motivation and a targeted practice. There's no point if you're learning an instrument to play the same scales over and over again, you're not going to progress. But if you go into your practice deliberately, this is what I want to learn, this is my target, things change. Now, deliberate practice correlates with intelligence and grit. So the smarter you are and the more persistence you have, the better you are able to practice. And so what grit is a personal variable reflecting your persistence, really, your ability to pursue a long-term goal. So grit is a very important trait, and I would argue that all established surgeons have a lot of grit. So your ability to pursue your goal through practice, that is a very, very important factor. Impulsivity, on the other hand, correlates poorly with effective practice. So the more impulsive you are, the less able you are to practice. So it is about facing this daunting task of becoming a spine surgeon, having the ability to deliberately focus on your training. Now, what you can see in some very interesting research is that in experts, you see how regional brain anatomy adapts. So practice actually changes your neural network. So the more you practice, the better your deliberate practice is, the more changes you see in a network. And there's a concept which is called cerebellar blending, which is worthwhile looking at. I'm not going to go into great detail, but in principle, your cerebellum is your working memory. This is your drive where you throw everything across. So initially, your thoughts, your processes are cognitive. So this is how I open the pedicle. This is how I put the pedicle screw in. All this is frontal lobe area, motor cortex. And then these patterns get parked in the cerebellum. So the cerebellum becomes like a library of different types of motions. Now, if you do it once, it doesn't get stored that well. But if you do it repetitively, it becomes automated. So the cerebellum forms a model of what you've done with your cortex. And it matches what you've done with what it has in the library. And it sees the small changes, and it builds a common library with common patterns. And this is why people are able to adapt what they do without thinking about it. Now, if you're doing this kind of a thing, it's very hard to be thinking about what you're actually doing. So this chap's not thinking about his brakes. He's not thinking about what he's going to do, how far he's going to do. He's concentrating the task at hand, and his cerebellum is mapping out everything which is going on in the background. So this is where you want to be in surgery. And if you watch master surgeons doing the task, and I had the privilege of visiting Bernard George in Paris a couple of times, the hands work automatically. So the task at hand becomes automatic, and then you have the space to actually think about what you're trying to achieve. And this is where we need to get. So it's a cognitive task of cerebellar blending. So the advantage of cerebellar blending is you can take multiple patterns, which you can park in your cerebellum. That allows you to very rapidly switch between different types of experiences which get mapped off. And by having this library, you can take similar experiences and your hindbrain can adapt. So even if you haven't directly experienced the situation, through having a big cerebellar library, you can adapt to this. That means if you've got a large library, you can immediately switch to new kinds of tasks through everything which you have learned. And this is what master surgeons do. On the other hand, some important aspects of surgical training and aptitude testing. What was done with the ENT evaluation for residents is residents had to carve soap shapes. And it was shown that the good soap carvers and the bad carvers are not necessarily the best and the worst doctors. That is not the case. What is far more interesting than based on that research is placing surgeons under pressure, how quickly they can adapt. So it's not your ability to sit for hours and hours to do something which makes you the best surgeon. In surgery and medicine, it is about your ability to handle and learn under pressure. So what was then adapted is a microvascular skills lab where you had 10 minutes orientation. This is what we're going to do. 20 minutes to do suturing under the microscope, under pressure, and see how people react. Now there you get a standard deviation of 20% who are above the mean. Most are average. The people that excel and become better under pressure, those are the ones which are the ideal candidates that are going to progress in a surgical career. Others become frustrated with tremors the more pressure they have, and there's a certain group, about 20%, that actually gets better over pressure. So this again is the ability to perform under stress. It's not only your ability to do something very well, it's your ability to perform under stress, and this correlates with your grit in the ability for you to learn. So your training has to include repetitively doing things with a time limit under a certain amount of pressure to become a talented, ideally surgeon that can cope with the various demands which are placed on you. So the trait of master surgeons, the most experienced really being the grit, the ability to practice through deliberate training. Resilience, to be able to work under pressure, that is also a trait which is extremely important, but all this only works if you actually have the enjoyment of practicing. So to recap the cerebellar blending, interference, you reduce the noise. If you have a large library, if you've experienced a lot of different scenarios, you reduce the noise about being to adapt quickly, and you can very quickly adapt new demands by your blended program library which you have. And this is what you will see in master surgeons conveying to their trainees. Now, it is not easy to convey this in the general environment. You can't take spinal trainees now and just train them the surgeons. You need to bring something forward before that. And this is where simulation comes in. As Bala had already alluded, this can be the matter of courses, cadaveric workshops, simulation, and this is where it goes. And what we've learned from simulation, the simulation does not need to be perfect. So the MotoGP racers, they will train on a simulator. It's not a perfect simulation of the racetrack, but it simulates those key features. And if you simulate the key features, then your brain is able to adapt it to a range of other activities. And this is really what it is about, providing feedback, learning the key features, building the library so that if you get into that situation, you can deal with it. And the problem is our highly experienced surgeons are fading away. So the people that we can learn from, these will be around for maybe another 10 years and they're fading out. So the simulation really needs to pick up on this. So in conclusion, training has changed substantially since the times of John Webb till now. There have been huge changes in regulatory, in the hours which can be spent, and we now need to focus on how we can train our new generation of surgeons using the simulators and those technologies which are available to really enhance the learning experience and to build on cerebellar blending. And I'm delighted that we have a number of speakers that can hone in on the technologies which will now allow this transition of skills for deliberate practice, cerebellar blending, and developing talented and, of course, resilient surgeons. Thank you very much for allowing me to present this.